record on this computer. Okay, we're good. So here we go. Another week has gone by, and it's an exciting night. We have Dr. Colgrove, who's going to be talking about childhood obesity tonight, and we're thrilled to have him. And before we get started, maybe there's someone who has a comment that they'd like to make and about share something in their life, good, bad, whatever. Any thoughts from anyone?
Or any new people?
Okay, so we don't have a lot of people who are speaking up, but if you have a question, Dan, did you raise your arm or is it just?
No, I'm not raising.
Okay, good. All right. So if there is anybody here for the first time, maybe you could tell us how you found out about the classes. Just kind of curious. You don't have to.
I found out through my doctor.
Great. Well, welcome. And anyone else? All right. So, Scott, do you have anything to add or subtract from the upcoming events?
Yeah, we have the walk coming up on the 22nd at the South Eugene High School track again. So that'll be coming up at 11 o'clock on that day. Yeah, Sean has to put that up on the website it's not there, but I do have it on the class newsletter. So it's updated there, but I'll send out a reminder on Friday, the day before, for the 22nd Eugene Plant-Based Providers Walk at 11 a.m. at the South Eugene High School track.
Great. It was really fun the last time, and we encourage all of you to come out and say hello. And in October, we're going to do a health fair, health expo or whatever it is, October, I can't remember, 14, 15, 15, 16, something like that. Someone asked me, are we going to be at the Lane County Fair with a booth? And I said, we never really gave it much thought this year, but we may consider doing that for next year when our volunteer organization has grown.
Yeah, I don't know if you could have a booth. I don't know if you can have a booth at the actual regular fair. That's what the health fair is for, but.
Okay, I don't know either. So yeah. Anyway, they brought it up and I tried to do my best dodging over
that. Yeah, I think the health fair is definitely what we got to do. I can't believe it'll be a year in October since we did our last one.
It was.
No, it's coming quick.
It really has.
Yeah.
So we have a few new people who've just logged on, and so we'll ask you one more time if there is anybody who'd like to kind of unmute yourself and say hello or offer some words of encouragement or any trouble that you might be having or any benefits you might be having. It's helpful for the rest of the group members to kind of hear your story, your thoughts. Yes, Marcia.
Yeah, I love eating whole food plant-based. I know that I will not have any problems with my health. I've been eating this way since 2017. Of course, it was a little dodgy in the beginning. Scott, I would love to join you on a walk, but boy, coming from Montana, I think it's too long a trek.
Yeah, for a 1 hour event, that would be a long way to go.
That would be. But I love eating whole foods, and I just know that by eating the whole foods, I was reading Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Die, and all the different things that you can get. You just don't have it when you eat whole foods. It's amazing.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us, and we appreciate you being here, and you've been to a lot of classes, so kudos to you.
Marshall, What's
Go
been
ahead,
the
Eric.
yeah, Marsha, what's been the most helpful thing for you in terms of what you've learned about whole food plant-based and how it's affected your life?
Well, my problem was my hands swelled up. And I thought, oh, this is Arthur, because my mother, my grandmother, my other grandmother had arthritis. And
Yeah.
it swelled up, it hurt, it was painful. And I thought, if I go to a doctor, they're going to say, here, take a pill, let's do some x-rays, let's check it out, la, la, la. And I thought, I don't want that. What can I do? And I know it was an inflammation of the body. So I Googled something about what causes inflammation in the body. And it took me to, I believe it was Dr. Neil Bernard. And he said, don't eat meat, dairy, or oil. And I thought, well, what do you eat? Huh. You don't know. When you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
So, it's just interesting.
Like, that's my food. Don't eat food. What?
But I got his book. A vegan starter book or something like that. And I share my books with everybody. And anyway, that was one I started with refried beans.
Nice.
But it's amazing. I have not had a touch of arthritis since 2017.
That's
I have
amazing.
had no problems. My mother had Alzheimer's. My dad had dementia. My grandmother had heart attack. My other grandpa had arteriosclerosis. That's on their death certificates. I do genealogy, so I have to get all these birth certificates and death certificates. So I know how they died. My other grandmother, she died from arteriosclerosis. However, she didn't know who anybody was for 15 years. Huh.
Mm.
So, I mean,
Wow.
that's your destiny if you eat that meat diet.
Absolutely, yes. Good.
So I'm glad I found this. I thank Beth for showing me about the lifestyle medicine. And I like the book club. I think it's amazing. And I think, the books we've read are just outstanding. So I just like everything about this little organization you got going. Thank you.
Sounds like you're a fan.
Thanks.
I am. I am.
Thank you, Marcia.
Okay.
All right. We'll take one more moment to see if there's anybody else who wants to contribute. And if not, then we'll get on with the next part of this and have Dr. Eric Colgrove talk to us about childhood obesity a bit. Anybody else? All right, so what I'm gonna do is make sure the room is muted first. And in order to do that, I need to go to a full screen and make sure everyone is muted here. Hopefully it doesn't mute out anybody else. Okay, I think we've got everybody muted that needs to be muted. And so Dr. Colgrove,
Sure. Yeah.
what's on the agenda for tonight?
Well, hey there. It's good to see y'all again. I'm really excited about people being here because it's so much better when people are actually able to come and ask questions and share their experiences. So thanks, Marsh, for sharing that experience. Really, and thanks for having me back again. I'm glad to be here. We're talking about childhood obesity, but it's just a small portion. The reason this topic came up is because there's a huge statement on how to take care of obese kids. But in thinking about this topic, I really wanted to get at why this is happening and think about what's going on in our brains. So first of all, I want to talk about a little bit about the brain and what's going on in the brain when we got this party going on in our brain. The party goes off when we're eating this food that's loaded with fat and sugar and salt, which is not in the real food. This is all the processed junk food that our lives are filled with so much in the United States. And now we've exported this around the world. So yes, it's everywhere. So basically, we have dopamine centers in our brain. It's kind of like a reward system or a pleasure pathway. They regulate motivation, reinforcement, learning, and they play a really important role in keeping us alive and not just sort of wandering around and doing nothing and going extinct. So really, this is crucial in the survival of our species. So this is how we are survivors, that we survive this planet, is that we've learned to, we basically evolved these pleasure centers in our brain that help us make better decisions as we go along in our life. Of course, it doesn't seem like they're better decisions when we're eating foods that kill us. So I'll explain that more, and we're actually going to see a movie that talks about that. In essence, dopamine centers act as the driving force behind our pursuit of pleasurable experiences, but then they basically shape our future decisions. So it's really, it's our genetics that is behind the survival of the fittest, and passing genes, being able to live long enough to pass genes on to the next generation. But it is really our dopamine centers that keep us making decisions at the moment. So let me try and get to my links. Yeah.
So you just share your screen? Are you trying to share your screen? You haven't shared your screen yet?
I'm not.
Okay.
I will in just a minute. So thinking about things that stimulate our brains in these centers, I'm curious if there's anything that you guys think of about what is really motivating to our brains, what sort of gets us moving, gets us motivated to take that next step or to take that next bite. But we'll talk about it in the movie. If you don't have any thoughts, you'll be hearing more about. Just keep that in the back of your mind. What are the things that lights up our brains? Another important question is what happens when we're exposed to something that is sort of unnaturally intense, a stimuli that's just not real, and that'll be addressed too. That's a really important issue, because that really is what our foods are, is that they're supra normal stimuli. And so you have normal stimuli, things that will light up your brain normally, but then you've got all these things that are just way overstimulating, like drugs or something, or there's a whole bunch of things we can talk about. But first of all, I want to watch the Pleasure Trap. This psychologist Doug Lisle is the one who did it, and just a wonderful thing. Scott and Charlie, do we watch it in other talks too, or not, or part of it?
No, I don't think we have any actual lectures that show him.
Yeah, I think this is just so crucial to understanding why this is going on. So actually, it's a 17-minute video. Believe it or not, I'm playing the whole thing because I think it's so darn important. And if you've seen it before, I swear that you've got to watch this multiple times to really get everything out of it. I've watched it at least 5 times, and I still learn stuff from it. It's just a wonderful thing. And also, there's a small part of it where he talks about moths, the little butterfly looking things. And I want you to pay attention to that, especially when that comes up, because I think it's one of my favorite.
You ever worry we'll live forever?
No. Let me pause that. I'm gonna try to share. If I can get the share screen going. Okay. And yes, there are going to be some ads. So I apologize now. This is an ad right here that's coming up, but it won't be for very long. So just so you know, if some weird ad pops up, it's just how it is, because I don't have YouTube. I don't pay for my YouTube. I don't know if you guys do, but I don't.
It's literally never crossed my mind. What if we lived?
I'm Doug Lyle. I'm a psychologist. It wasn't my first choice. Wanted to be an artist, and should have been, but my father refused to give me the emotional support, or more importantly, the financial support that my talent so richly deserved. History will judge him. As much as I'd like to process my issues about that this morning, which believe me, I would, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to do this psychology thing. So what we're going to talk about is try to shed a little light on a puzzle. And that puzzle is, if we were bright enough and alert enough and conscientious enough and lucky enough, and we had heard the right message about health, and we had heard someone like Dr. John McDougall or T. Colin Campbell or Caldwell Esselstyn or Dr. Neil Barnard, if we knew the right direction to go, why is it so hard to go there? That's what we're going to try to explore today. So I'll be using some scientific concepts and some charts and things like that, but I'll even use a few tricks from psychology. But more than anything, I'm going to be using my artistic skills to try to help bring this home. So we're going to begin by asking and answering one of the great philosophical questions of all time. We're going to be solving the problem of what I call the pleasure trap, which is this force that pulls us the wrong direction, but we have to begin here. Everybody knows what this is, of course. Don't all answer at once. Of course it was a bird, ma'am. That wasn't ever in doubt. This one is this is a gray shrike. This is a proud bird of prey of the Mideastern desert. This one's a male. You can tell by the distinctive markings. And what this little guy does all spring long is he goes around and he kills bugs and he pokes them on thorns inside of his territory, which leads us to one of the great philosophical questions of all time, which is, why does the male gray shrike kill bugs and poke them on thorns? Guesses, anybody? Somebody said sex. He just jumped right to the point. Yes, it turns out that that's correct. This is exactly why he does this. And this is because after he pokes all his bugs on thorns, then the females come in later and they fly around and they see which guys have the most stuff in their tree, and then they mate with the guys with the most stuff. What a shock this is. But this helped us solve a very puzzling sociological question here in Silicon Valley during the first boom time, why suddenly there were so many BMWs parked in trees, but we figured that out. Now it's going to turn out that there's a whole orchestration of how it is that he knows how to go about doing this. This is all about him activating these instincts, or the environmental cues activating instincts, so that he does things that are conducive to the biological problems of survival and reproduction. And so this is kind of how it is that he works. He's built by genes, but not just his body is built by genes, also his brain is built by genes. So therefore his whole life experience is being orchestrated ultimately by the genetic code. So he has instincts that are built into his neural circuitry, but those instincts are now sensitive to environmental cues. So that's when he sees a little worm wiggling, he'll go and kill that worm. That's what he does. If he sees a mate, then he shows off or does whatever he does. But the point is that those neural circuits are sensitive to these inputs, and then what happens is computations are run in what you and I would call thought. Now, it's not the kind of thought that we think through, but it's the same process ultimately, that he's essentially activating information in an ancient library built by the genetic code where he figures out what's the right moves to make. But the way he knows what to do is he has feelings. And feelings now arise in the system that compel him to do behaviors. And the behaviors he does, as we see, are circular in the fact that they feed in now to the statistical increased likelihood of the genes being on the planet. That's why he has the thinking and the feeling and the behavior that he does, is because they're all part of a symphony that increase the likelihood of those genes being here. Now, so as a psychologist, what I'm really most excited about is I'm excited about feelings, because I have a lot of feelings, and I'm sure you have feelings, and all of that's what I'm interested in is feelings. And what feelings are is something that I did not know as I was going through graduate school. So in the 1980s, if you asked a psychologist what are feelings and what are they for, they couldn't have told you. because they didn't know. So we now know that what feelings are is they're signals. They're actually evidence that signal to the organism when something in the environment, some environmental cue, is evidence of something that's either good for the genes or good for the statistical likelihood of gene survival or bad for it. So feelings are either good or bad depending upon whether or not they serve the interests ultimately of the substances that built the entire machine in the first place, which is the genes. So feelings are signals, and that's what they are. Now, the way these basic signals work is as follows. All kinds of creatures have a tripartite motivational system, and that is pleasure-seeking, pain avoidance, and energy conservation. These are sort of the ways that creatures go about doing what it is that they do in the business of life. So the main positive incentive that creatures seek is they seek pleasure. So this thing's flying around the landscape basically with a neon sign flashing in its head saying food, sex, food, sex. Unless it's a male, then it's sex, food, sex, food. It's pretty much the same thing. The other thing it does is that it's also seeking cues from the environment to see if there's pain that needs to be avoided. So if it's a little too cold, it'll move to where it's warmer. A little too warm, it'll move to where it's cooler. It'll look out for predators and try to avoid those. This thing is always looking to try to figure out how to increase its likelihood of survival and reproduction, either through seeking pleasurable things or avoiding painful things. It's also very careful with its energy. And so it makes the very best possible use of its forays. It tries to make sure that it gets as much stuff in the tree as it can, because if it doesn't, then it's going to be much less likely for those genes to be on the planet 100 or 200 years from now. So it has to be efficient. So these three things now tell us why creatures essentially do what they do. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mess with this guy a little bit and see if we can learn something important. We're going to put him in a cage. In this cage there's going to be two buttons. And the blue button is going to be a regular old button that if he hits it, a door is going to open. He's going to be able to fly out into an aviary and start killing bugs and putting them on thorns. But the red button is going to be a magic button. And if he hits this button, there's going to be a trap door inside of this cage. And in it is going to be, through that trap door is going to be a female coming into the cage, all ready to rock and roll. Now, I want you to think hard about which button this guy's going to be pushing. We know it's the red button because it's the pursuit of pleasure, but also the avoidance of pain and the conservation of energy. So both buttons will allow him to pursue pleasure, including the one where he can fly out of the aviary, but it's not as efficient. It saves energy if he can hit the magic button, and that's the button he's going to be hitting as soon as he figures this out. But now we're going to put him back in the cage, and we're going to change things up just a little bit. Now the blue button is going to be the female. And the red button is going to be the magic button, where we're going to put a little glass pipe in his head, and we're going to drive it right down into the pleasure centers of his brain. And we're going to put in that glass pipe cocaine. And every time he hits that red button, it's going to activate the pleasure centers by flooding those centers with dopamine. And dopamine is the main chemical that causes him to have an excited euphoria that we call pleasure. Now, let's think about which one he's going to do. We know that he's going to hit the red button, and the reason why is because he's going to save energy in the process. In fact, if we keep putting cocaine in that, he's going to keep hitting that button so often that even if he gets hungry and even if he gets thirsty and very tired, and even if there's females in the cage, he won't even look at her. What he's going to do is keep hitting that red button, and in about 10 to 12 days, he'll be dead. So I know that you folks have heard this kind of thing before. You know that this is an extraordinary trap. But I want you to pause to consider from the subjective point of view what's actually taking place inside that animal's mind. What he's actually doing is he's thinking and feeling that he's being extremely biologically successful when in fact he's self-destructing. That's useful. What we've done is by messing with the environment, we've actually changed how, we've misguided the instincts and we've hijacked them so that now this creature thinks it's doing a good thing when in fact it's doing a very destructive thing. Now, it's not just cocaine. We all know about the ravages of drug addiction and all that, but we're going to talk about something else. Here's me on my front porch, and this is the scene that takes place every once in a while when I walk out and I left the porch light on. And what happened is that these moths are designed by nature to fly to the light. In fact, they're designed to fly to the moon or celestial objects to use those for navigation. But if they do that, if they're looking for the brightest thing in the sky, and it turns out that the brightest thing in the sky at the nighttime is my porch light, then they keep hitting the porch light, getting disoriented and disturbed, and then they flutter down and hit it again and hit it again and hit it again, and eventually they're going to die. Okay? So anytime we do, use a supernormal stimulus, a stimulus that is not supposed to be in the environment, that is not characteristic of that animal's natural history, we run the threat that that creature is going to make huge mistakes, potentially self-destructive, maybe even fatal. Now, this is a very scientific pie chart about everything that everybody's eating. We know what people are eating today. They're eating enormous quantities of meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, and sugar. They're eating burgers, pizza, hamburgers, etc. We know they're doing all these things, extremely rich food, and this rich food is clogging up people's arteries, making them obese, and getting them in serious trouble. Pick a study, any study, and all we have is a little slice of the green. We have a little bit of healthy food that are people eating, but mostly they're staying away from unprocessed whole natural plant food, which is what this organism thrives on and what it does best. Now, here's what we're going to call the dietary pleasure trap, and this is a chart out of Dr. Goldhammer's in my book by that same title, The Pleasure Trap. And what's happening here is we're seeing that in the first of the 5 sections, we're seeing how we're supposed to have a relationship to food, that we're actually supposed to be enjoying our food in a normal range. But then in the second phase, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce supernormal food, food that is hyper-concentrated, where there's far more energy or calories in it per bite. And as a result, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lift in the dopamine circuitry. You know, I have to say I've never liked this chart. Here we go. This is a better chart. Now, this is how this is going to work. You see in phase 1, this is whole natural foods. These are the foods that we were designed by nature to eat, and we're supposed to like them, and we do. However, in phase 2, if you introduce junk food, all the foods that people really love, if you introduce those foods, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lift in the dopamine circuitry because that food is richer. There's more calories per bite once we strip away all the healthy fiber and water and minerals and vitamins from food, and we leave just behind super concentrated food like oil, sugar, salty materials, cheese, etc. All these kinds of really rich foods, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lift in the experience. And the individual is going to say, that is great. There's more energy per bite here. This must be the right thing to do. Now, what's going to happen is you might say, well, that's great. That's a nice high to live on. Why don't we just live there? If it costs me a few years, if it costs me being overweight, I get a little bit sick, look at how much more pleasure I get. But we don't get more pleasure because as we see, what's going to happen is we're going to get used to it. Whenever you have a very intense stimulus that's outside of the normal bounds of stimulation, what's going to happen is that the brain and the sensors are going to get dulled. They're going to defend themselves against that high-intensity stimulus, and they're going to back it down. And we're going to wind up in a process that we call habituation or neuroadaptation, where we're going to get used to it. This is what happens if you go into somebody's house at Christmas time and you smell the great Christmas tree, and it smells great for about 15 minutes, and then you get used to it, okay? And so that's what happens at stage 3. So stage 3 is now we have habituated to this very rich food, and now we're getting about the same amount of pleasure as we always got from food, except that now we're eating food that's super rich. And now here's the problem. Now we wind up with things like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. These are the problems that we start to see. And now this is about the time that you may get lucky, where you hear a John McDougall, a T. Colin Campbell, a Neil Barnard, a Dean Ornish. You hear a Caldwell Esselstyn. You hear someone that can help you go the right direction, and you recognize, I know what I need to do now. I need to go this direction instead of that direction. But when we do, and we go towards healthy food, we see what happens. We go to stage 4. So now we have the answer to the question that we started with. If we knew the right thing to do, why is it so difficult to do? The reason is, when you start at stage 1 and go to stage 2, when you do the wrong thing, it feels right. And when you're at stage 3 and you go to stage 4, you do the correct thing and it feels wrong. Your motivational system is spun 180 degrees against this problem. Every instinct in you is telling you to seek the most pleasure for the least pain and the least effort. But when you do that in the modern environment, you're taking in cues that are fooling the system and pulling us right into what we call the pleasure trap. Now, how do we get out of this? What we do is we go through stage 4 to stage 5. That's essentially recovery. And if we do that, we get more and more sensitive. The food tastes better. The problem is that takes several weeks to accomplish that, and that's a several-week journey that very few people will ever make. So in order to do that, we have to have a few tricks that can help us. Here's the first trick I have. First trick is a glass of water. And this is not to drink 8 glasses of water a day. That's not the point. I'm talking about going on just water for, say, 24 hours. If you do that after you've cleaned out the last tofu cutie in the cupboard, you did that on Saturday night, a good thing to do is to go all day Sunday and don't eat all the way till dinner time, because as you do that, the taste buds get increasingly sensitive, and then healthy food will taste better. Putting any system under deprivation for a while is a very good way to recover sensitivity. Another trick is this. It's more complicated. If we take juice, something like carrot and apple juice or something like that, and we use juice for 2 or 3 days and do a juice fast, again, what we're doing is we're taking all the fat and salt receptors offline, and so we're just surviving on effectively the sugar that comes from the juice. This is another way to take those the fat and salt receptors, give them a break, and make it possible for us to recover our sensitivity. There's other ways, other places to get support. There's websites, truenorthhealth.com, drmcdougall.com, PCRM, Dr. Barnard's group, T. Colin Campbell, Engine 2. These are all places that have terrific free materials, tips, recipes, all kinds of things that can help you. But if that's not enough, if you need experiences, these places also have wonderful experiences where you can join other people and have the experience of eating healthy food in a supportive environment. And what happens is that people end up feeling really good, and then at the end, they hold hands and sing songs. And, not really, just kidding. But people do feel great as they go through these transformative experiences, and this is another way to help support your journey in trying to make your todays better and your tomorrows more secure. If you do that journey, you will get to have the life you deserve. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Right.
That's really good.
Yeah, just one of my favorite videos.
Yeah, I talk about the pleasure trap in the food addiction class, but I don't show any video that explains it real well. So that's really good.
It's a long video, but it really is helpful for me, at least. And I think the reason why the moths really stick out in my mind is because it explains this super normal stimulus so well. This idea that, moths normally are flying to the brightest thing in the sky. Usually that's the moon. But when you've got a porch light, it hijacks their instincts, and they they just keep on hitting that porch light over and over and over and over until they die. And that's kind of what we do with food. We're basically hijacking our appetites and hijacking what pleasure that we get from food by eating these super normal, very dense junk foods. And that really gets at the heart of why obesity exists, why pediatric obesity exists. So because kids are great at doing this. They're just like adults. They in this term that they just are very heavily cued onto the dopamine center in the brain that tells them that I'm doing the right thing. I must be, I'm really enjoying myself. So my body is telling me I'm on the right spot. So, okay, let me get some things set here. Yeah, what do you guys think of that? Any thoughts about that? Anyone seen that before? Besides Scott and Charlie?
It's a really good book too, The Pleasure Trap. I have it on the class website under the book list, so check it out.
I haven't read that. Yeah, interesting psychologist. Yeah, and I don't know if he does mainly research or what, academic kind of stuff. But I like it because he throws in lots of humor in his talk, and it's just a interesting, fascinating talk that you really don't hear anywhere else. And this is really what motivates us to do these kind of crazy things. It explains things like why people are get so far into drugs and they can't get themselves out. It's exactly the same thing. So. All right. So the super dense, super stimulating foods have really led to the rise in obesity problems over the past few decades. And in the last 30 years, childhood obesity rates have more than doubled, and the rate of adolescent obesity has quadrupled. Children who are obese at age 3 are 90% that they'll be overweight at least as adolescents. 90%. So not that they will be obese, but obese or overweight. So kids who are obese at 3, 90% chance they're going to be overweight or obese as adolescents. And among adolescents, their most excessive weight gain was between the ages of 2 and 6. So that's that pediatric age. You know, people think, oh, it's just baby fat, he's going to outgrow or whatever. But it really does make a major have a major effect on your physiology and on your brain. Your brain gets stuck on these unreal foods, these horrible junk foods. If one is obese between the ages of 6 and 9, then the chance of being obese as an adult is like 70%. So another thing that tells you that pediatric obesity is really, really important. The number rises to 95% if obesity still exists between the ages of 10 and 14. So these adolescents that are obese, they're 95% likelihood that they'll be obese adults, which is just tremendous. Doesn't mean you're stuck with that you can't change it, that you can't make a change. You can, but the data says that a lot of people struggle. It becomes a lifetime struggle if you're a tween or a young teen and you're obese. It sort of haunts you for your whole life. It really points to the importance of addressing rapid weight gain in children, and it's not just statistical trends. These stats are directly connected to adult obesity. Many adult diseases and conditions are associated with it as well. So it's not just that overweight stat. Yeah, it's really, you see the whole, just so many problems. And he alluded to them in the movie too, about all the things that go along with obesity. But studies in the past 10 years have made it clear that there's a burden of disease related to this high BMI. And so there's all kinds of disease, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And you guys, do y'all know what BMI is? I don't know that I need to describe that, but I just want to make sure we're talking about high BMI. It's the measure of, basically a ratio of weight versus height. It's actually height squared. And it's a way of thinking, I like to explain it as, if I told you I was 300 pounds, you'd go, wow, 300 pounds, that's a lot of weight. But then if I told you I was 7 feet tall, you'd go, wait a minute, 300 pounds, 7 feet tall. So it's a way of showing that ratio. So there are charts, and you can just type in, if you Google BMI, they're easy. You don't have to calculate it yourself. There are easy little websites that you just put in your weight and your height, and it'll calculate it for you and tell you where you are. So, let's see. Yeah. So anyways, junk food hijacks our behavior. It's not really, until we understand the role of nutrition and how food serves us, we can break free from junk food. And really, animals have a harder time with this, right? Because they can't really maybe process all the deeper implications. But we're human, and we have pretty powerful brains, so we can step back and say, geez, maybe I do need to start eating some real food. What is the food that my body evolved with for millions of years, and what can we do to sort of get out of the trap of disease that our country, our world seems to be stuck in? And so we can actually step back and break free from those personal pleasure traps. It's a good thing about being human. The normal stimulus, which is a plant-based foods, that's what we're evolved with, is what we evolved with, and it's just really, that's the food, that's the energy source that was around us all the time for millions of years, and we didn't have all these processed foods and junk foods. So and why do those junk foods exist? It really, a lot of it has to do with, well, because that's what kept people coming back for more, and people were able to sell more and more food, right? So this is true in restaurants. It's true with Oreo cookies or whatever it is. It's what keeps you back, and it's what makes people money. So I don't think people are being evil about it. It's just that people want to make money, and this is a way to do that, to basically enter this whole dopamine center and stimulate, make people have pleasure. And so that's what it is all about. But now we need to sort of get back to eating the foods that we really should be eating, and not eating just junk because it stimulates our brains. It's the plants that kept us alive and allowed our species to thrive. And occasionally we ate other things too for energy, but mainly it was just plants. I'm going to show you another video, a Gregor video. Let me share the screen again. Okay.
The traditional medical view on obesity is summed up nearly a century ago. All obese persons are alike in one fundamental respect: they literally overeat. While this may be true in a technical sense, this is in reference to overeating calories, not food. Our primitive urge to overindulge is selective. People don't tend to lust for lettuce. We have a natural inborn preference for sweet, starchy, fatty foods, because that's where the calories are concentrated. Think about hunting and gathering efficiency.
I'm not sure why this keeps stopping.
We used to have to work hard for our food. Prehistorically, it doesn't make sense to spend all day collecting types of food that, on average, don't provide at least a day's worth of calories, right? You would have been better off staying back in the cave, right? So we evolved to crave foods with the biggest caloric bang for their buck. If you were able to steadily forage a pound of food an hour, and it had 250 calories per pound, it might take you 10 hours just to break even on your calories for the day. But if you were gathering something with 500 calories a pound, you could be done in 5 hours and spend the next 5 practicing your wall paintings. So the greater the energy density, the more calories per pound, the more efficient the foraging. So we developed an acute ability to discriminate foods based on calorie density, and to instinctively desire the densest. If you study the fruit and vegetable consumption of 4-year-old children, their liking correlates with calorie density. They prefer bananas over berries, carrots over cucumbers. Well, Duh, isn't that just a preference for sweetness? No, they also prefer potatoes over peaches, and green beans over melon, just like monkeys prefer avocados over bananas. We appear to have this inborn drive to maximize calories per mouthful. All the foods that researchers tested were naturally less than 500 calories per pound. Bananas topped the chart at about 400. Something funny happens when you start going over that. We lose our ability to differentiate. Over the natural range of calorie densities, we have this uncanny aptitude to pick out the subtle distinctions. However, once you start heading towards bacon, cheese, and chocolate territory, which can reach thousands of calories per pound, our perceptions become relatively numb to the differences. No wonder, since these foods were unknown to our prehistoric brains. It's like the dodo bird failing to evolve a fear response because they had no natural predators, and we all know how that turned out. Or sea turtle hatchlings crawling in the wrong direction towards artificial light rather than the moon. Aberrant behavior explained by an evolutionary mismatch. The food industry exploits our innate biological vulnerabilities by stripping crops down into almost pure calories, straight sugar, oil, which is pretty much pure fat, and white flour, which is mostly refined starch. First, they have to remove the fiber, because it effectively has 0 calories. Run brown rice through a mill to make white, and you lose about 2/3 of the fiber. Turn whole wheat flour into white and lose 75%. Or you can run crops through animals to make meat, eggs, and dairy, and remove 100% of the fiber. And what you're left with is CRAP, an acronym used by one of my favorite dietitians, Jeff Novick. Calorie-rich and processed foods. Calories are condensed in the same way plants are turned into addictive drugs like opiates and cocaine. Concentration, crystallization, distillation, and extraction. They even appear to activate the same reward pathways in the brain. Put people with food addiction in an MRI scanner, show them a picture of a chocolate milkshake, and the areas that light up in their brains are the same as when cocaine addicts are shown a video on crack smoking. Food addiction is a misnomer. People don't suffer out-of-control eating behaviors to food in general. We don't tend to compulsively crave carrots. Milkshakes are packed with sugar and fat, two of the signals to our brains of calorie density. When people are asked to rate different foods in terms of cravings and loss of control, most incriminated was a load of crap, highly processed foods like donuts, along with cheese and meat. Those least related to problematic eating behaviors, fruits and vegetables. Calorie density may be the reason people don't get up in the middle of the night and binge on broccoli. Animals don't tend to get fat when they're eating the foods they were designed to eat. Now, there is a confirmed report of free-living primates becoming obese, but that was a troop of baboons who evidently stumbled across some dumpsters at a tourist lodge. The garbage-feeding animals weighed 50% more than their wild-feeding counterparts. Sadly, we can suffer the same mismatched fate and become obese, eating garbage too. For millions of years, before we learned how to hunt, our biology evolved largely on leaves, roots, fruits, and nuts. Maybe it would help if we went back to our roots and cut out the crap.
I love Dr. Greger.
I love it. Sorry, I'm having some difficulties getting my notes up. Okay. Well, let's see. So we know that childhood obesity is strongly associated with abnormal blood fats like cholesterol and triglycerides. These are strong risk factors for atherosclerosis, which you may remember from my previous lectures, starts in childhood. Remember, there's even some studies that show that even fetuses will start having some atherosclerosis from maternal diets. So yeah, that starts very early. One study showed that obesity between the ages of 12 to 18 was the strongest risk factor associated with thickness of the inner lining of the carotid arteries, which correlates strongly to cardiovascular disease. So we're talking about the thickness of the inner layer of the arteries that go to your brain, that a very strong predictor of future cardiovascular disease, that the strongest association was obesity between the ages of 12 and 18. So that's your strong risk factor. Obesity was even stronger than like hypertension, smoking, elevated cholesterol, which are strong risk factors, but obesity between the ages of 12 and 18 were even stronger. Other medical conditions associated with pediatric obesity includes hypertension, eating disorders, joint problems, liver damage, and then later in life, things like cancer. All right. One of the problems that unhealthy weight has been is that it's been normalized in our country. And actually, I have parents that complain that their children are, I have numerous parents where they complain their child really too skinny, despite me showing them that the BMI is normal and the growth charts are perfectly like average. And yeah, that's really a pretty shocking thing when you realize how obesity has been just completely normalized. Let me show this one. Go back to here. Share one thing with you. And while I'm getting this up, what kind of questions or thoughts? Did you guys have any thoughts or questions or stories about this? Any questions? Feel free to ask. There are questions, and we like it when it's interactive and you're able to feel comfortable enough to ask questions. You really should. There's nothing that you should feel dumb about or anything. So please ask questions.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
And I remember when my son was little, like a baby, the pediatrician kept telling me I needed to feed him more because he just wasn't big enough. And he was eating as much as he could. Like he ate all the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And parents get so wrapped up in trying to get their kids to eat more and you know, that's right. It's part of your job as a parent is to, especially as a mother, is kind of getting your kids to thrive. And so if your kids aren't fatter than the neighbors, then there must be something wrong with what you're doing, right? It's kind of sad, but yeah, there's this pressure.
Yeah, well, I remember as a kid too that I couldn't get up until I ate everything on my plate, and I know how that has affected me as an adult. And I know that to a point, like we have to like get our children to eat, and sometimes they rush because they want to get back to whatever they were doing. But
yeah.
So there's a balance, but I'm trying not to do that with my own kids now.
You know, there's a whole bunch of unhealthy habits that as parents we do. I'm not trying to make people feel guilty, but you know, we do things that kind of sabotage our kids having a normal, healthy relationship to food, and that's one of them. Got to clean everything off your plate. Anything else anyone can think of? Or other unhealthy habits? Yes.
When my youngest he's 3 now, and when he was little, I didn't think he was gaining enough weight. My doctor put him on Pediatric to gain weight.
Right. Pediatric, that's something I've told people to do before too. And when those kids are really, really, really having a hard time getting anywhere near the curve, I'll do that. But you're right. It's basically, it's just a form of processed food. Sugar is not real food, but it's not something that I think we should be telling so many people. But you're right. I think pediatricians are telling their kids still to if they're not on the average part of the curve, that if they're anywhere below average, that they should be encouraging somehow to get extra calories, bump that kid up. Yeah, that's a good one. Any other thoughts about things that we do?
Mary?
I volunteer agency. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And at that Bags of Love, we put together clothing and other supplies for children who are in crisis. And I can see firsthand the changes. We have 2-year-olds who are wearing size 6 clothing. I had a 14-year-old young man who was wearing XX large men's clothing. And this happens more frequently. It's actually unusual for a child to wear their actual size. So this is very real.
It is. Wow. Another good example. Yes.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics has come up with the answer to this. They have a solution.
Well, and I'm getting there.
Okay.
That's yeah, and it's not super straightforward, but it's we'll get that. I'm getting there soon. Let me just kind of show you one thing. This looks at over the past 23 years the rise in obesity and then the rise in severe obesity. So you see how that's gone from 4.7% of kids are severely, and actually this is actually not kids, it's adults 20 and over, severely obese 4.7% to 9.2%. So really over doubled in that 23 years. And it's just obesity itself from 30 to 42%. So that is definitely a shocking kind of thing. Oh, and let me see if I can get to the next one, because that's a good one too. Yeah. Right. This is the pediatric one. And I want to. Okay. Here you can see how this kind of breaks it down to age groups. And this is from the 60s all the way up to present, and just that massive rise. And yeah, so these are just lines on a curve, so that they're not as powerful as stories like when you're seeing yourself these kids wearing extra large when they're young school children, and how that never used to happen. So 50 years ago, 60 years ago, it was just really rare. And now look at the kids even 2 to 5 years old that are definitely actual obese. How in the past 10 to 20 years we've just gotten our kids chunkier and chunkier. And it's not their fault, and we have to be careful not to shame these kids. So you have to look at, well, what is causing it? What can we do to to reverse the clock. And yeah, what do we do? So I'll get to what the AAP is talking about here in a second. Let me just get to that. Let me just jump to that. All right. Oh, well, actually, before I do that, let me just mention how I want to show you is something about fiber and how fiber affects. Let me just bring this up for a second. Not it either. Okay. Yeah, so fiber affects how you're feeling satiated. Satiation just means satisfied, the feeling of fullness. So there are ways that fiber makes us feel full, and that's number one, just because it's bulk and volume, and it physically stretches out our stomachs more. So when you've got really dense, you know, let's say you've got some chocolate, it's got a bunch of sugar and fat in it, it's not going to make you feel full, or whatever this sort of junk food is it's not going to have that fiber that fills you up, that fills your stomach up. And so things like beans are going to have just tons of fiber and can have more bulk and make you feel a lot fuller. Fiber also slows down your digestion and your absorption. It's going to take a while for your stomach to kind of process some of this food, where some foods are just very readily absorbable, and those tend to be the ones that are processed. So unprocessed food just has takes longer for it to go through the stomach and through the intestines, and so you feel full and better for longer. I don't know if you guys had that sensation. I'm sure you had. A lot of people are eating the whole food, plant-based foods on this talk tonight, and I know, you know, if you've ever had like steel cut oats versus like just some you know, processed cereal, you feel so much more full for longer. It's unbelievable. I definitely I'm a believer after I've kind of converted to using more steel cut oats versus other things. There's also, you tend to do more chewing when you've got full whole food with fiber in it. It definitely takes more chewing, and that it gives you a better mouth feel, is what they call it, which just feels like you're actually doing something more, that it actually fills you up more when your mouth is more active. You know, whereas if you barely chew it and swallow it right away, it's not going to fill you up. You're not going to feel it as much. But you definitely get also number 5 here, improved gut health. You know, fiber acts like a prebiotic. It's food for your bacteria that are in your gut, and those gut bacteria are going to be producing things that are healthy and make you feel full. Things like butyrate, and butyrate is it's a long chain fatty acid that is basically gonna do a bunch of different things that make you feel healthier and fuller. And you know, I can go more into this, but it's pretty technical, and I don't think I'm going to, but something. Oh man, my phone keeps going off. Okay. All right. Let me get get you. I'm going to share another video with you real quick. Okay. Another Greg video.
In the U.S., we tend to get less than 20 grams of fiber a day, only about half the minimum recommended intake. But in populations where many of our deadliest diseases are practically unknown, rural China, rural Africa, they're eating huge amounts of whole plant foods, up to 100 grams of fiber a day or more, which is what it's estimated our Paleolithic ancestors were getting based on dietary analyses of modern-day primitive hunter-gatherer tribes, and by analyzing coprolites, human fossilized feces. In other words, paleopoop. These most intimate of ancient human artifacts were often ignored or discarded during many previous archaeological excavations, but careful study of materials painstakingly recovered from human paleofeces says a lot about what ancient human dietary practices were like, given their incredibly high content of fiber, undigested plant remains, strongly suggesting that for over 99% of our existence as a distinct species, our gastrointestinal tract has been exposed to the selective pressures exerted by a fiber-filled diet of whole plant foods. So for millions of years before the first stone tools and evidence of butchering our ancestors, we're eating plants. But what kind of plants? One way you can tell if animals are natural folivores or frugivores, meaning leaf eaters or fruit eaters, is to map the area of absorptive mucosa in our gut versus their functional body size. Folivores are those meant to eat mostly foliage, leaves, while frugivores are better designed to eat fruit. The faunivores eat the fauna, another name for carnivore. If you chart animals out this way, they fall along distinct lines. So where do humans land? Here's our functional body size, and here's our absorptive area. So while eating our greens is important, it appears the natural dietary status of the human species is primarily that of a fruit eater. Why does it matter how much fiber we used to eat? Well, one theory for the rising levels of obesity in Western populations is that the body's mechanisms for controlling appetite evolved to match how many plants we used to eat. Our ancestors ate so many plant foods, we were getting like 100 grams of fiber a day. So for millions of years, food equaled fiber. So no surprise, one of the physiological mechanisms our body evolved to suppress our appetite involved this fiber. For example, fiber is metabolized by our gut flora into short-chain fatty acids, which bind to and activate receptors on the surface of our cells that alter our metabolism. For example, activating receptors on fat cells to increase the expression of the weight-reducing hormone leptin. Other hormones are affected as well, since until recently, food meant fiber. An increase in food intake meant an increase in fiber intake, which made our gut bacteria so happy they made lots of short-chain fatty acids, activating the cell surface receptors, releasing a bunch of hormones that make us lose our appetite and downregulate hunger, so we eat less. But if we eat less, there's less fiber in our gut, so less of these hormones are released, which boosts our appetite, we get hungry, and we want to eat. But what if food doesn't equal fiber, like on the standard American diet? Then we keep just getting those signals to eat, eat, eat. We're always hungry. If we haven't eaten our 100 grams of fiber for the day, our body may be like, what, are we starving here? Discovering this mechanism makes the food and pharmaceutical industries very excited. They figure they can now come up with, the new drugs in the fight against the current obesity onslaught, or we could just eat as nature intended.
All right. Yeah, I'll get to the point here, which is what this is basically this idea that obesity is a disease. And really, I want to just mention that.
My name's John Mandrola.
Ooh.
I'm a cardiac electrophysiologist,
What?
rhythm doctor in Louisville, Kentucky. Been there for 20 years, my 20th year. I do consultative heart rhythm work, and I'm in.
My YouTube was still playing. All right. So,
By the way, that's
anyways,
one
I
of
was
my
saying
favorite.
that.
That's one of my
What's that?
favorite videos.
Oh, that one that was just playing?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see what it was.
No, the one you just played is one of my
Oh,
favorite videos.
yeah, you played it during the fiber one too, right?
Yeah, it's well worth seeing over and over again till
It is.
till they learn the basic message here. It's important.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for introducing me to that one. That's a great video, I agree. Okay, but basically I wanted to talk about this idea that in 1988 the NIH designated obesity as a chronic disease. So the NIH put out a statement later in 2011, stated a strategic plan on how to take care of this disease. So this whole classification of obesity as a disease came up. And then basically in 2013, the American Medical Association recognized obesity as a complex chronic disease that requires medical attention. And then now just recently here, we have the American Academy of Pediatrics that just 5 months ago outlined an evidence-based evaluation and treatment of children and adolescents with overweight and obesity. And it's a 200-page document, so it really is a massive thing. And actually, it's 321 pages, but but when you get rid of the references, it comes down to 200 pages. But they do a really good job looking at a lot of science and talking about all these different issues that surround basically the risk factors, the comorbidities that come along with obesity, the outcomes, the treatment of obesity. That they did this deep dive into all these different aspects of obesity in children. And what they came up with was their final takeaway was basically that physicians should offer adolescents age 12 and older with obesity weight loss drugs. So if you can imagine that's sort of the ultimate idea, was that for kids 12 and up, that they should offer medicines, and then teenagers 13 and up with severe obesity, greater than 120% of the BMI scale, that they should be evaluated for metabolic and bariatric surgery. So actually stomach stapling. So this is a really big deal. And you think, well, gee, don't they try some lifestyle stuff first? And they looked at the data for lifestyle issues, and the data that they presented really was kind of iffy. It showed it was not a consistently positive fact. But the same thing was with actually stomach surgery too. Just as flip-floppy, the reason that lifestyle didn't always work was because it was hard to do. And what they've come by is that you really, in order to have a good, successful program, you have to have 26 hours of lifestyle changes that go on over a period of 3 to 12 months. And so 26 hours of face-to-face provider treatment over a 3 to 12 month period. And so they call that an intensive health behavioral lifestyle treatment. And they were saying, well, that because that is so difficult to get to, then we're going to give you these other opportunities. You can try lifestyle stuff, but if you're not getting anywhere, really you should jump to medicines or surgery. And so that is their, out of this gigantic statement, that's their guidelines. Try some lifestyle treatment, and they do talk about different aspects of lifestyle. You know, they're not just wishy-washy on what should be done. They said here's how much screen time kids should have. Here's the activity the kinds of activity, and they're really pretty specific about things. But they said, well, you know, since we really aren't able to educate our children, we need to really make sure that we're taking care of this obesity problem and really jumping to medicines and surgery, which in our kids, and that just really kind of strikes me as being, I don't know, just really, really nearsighted. I don't know, how does that strike you guys? Does that seem right? Do you think our 13-year-olds should be doing surgery for obesity?
Didn't they recommend medications even younger than 12? That's what I recall.
It's 12. And they said that you can do them younger, but the actual guidelines say are at 12. So, yeah.
Velvet.
I just said absolutely not, because it's just so crazy, because I feel like even myself at 38 years old, I'm more than capable of exercising and losing weight and eating right and learning. And I think our kids are too. And it's just a change in perspective, I guess. And parents need education, and they've been pushed a certain way to, you know, it's just crazy.
The lifestyle treatments that have come up with, and they put under scrutiny with studies. What they haven't really looked at is somebody who's trained in lifestyle medicine and whole food plant-based diets. They haven't. There's been no studies looking at people who actually can do that. Actually, give them good advice, and so I think that's really what we're missing is that we don't have, you know, we don't have that the real data, and they're making these suggestions that we should think about trying medicines as our backup crutch. These things cost $1,400 to $2,800 a month, and have zero benefit, long-term benefit. So once the medicine stopped, the appetite comes right back because they're appetite suppressants, and the weight just comes right back. And actually, even when you're doing it every day for a year, you're actually the treatment benefit is 10 to 20% weight loss. You know, that for spending $1,400 to $2,800 a month on a medicine that has a lot of side effects, and is that expensive? I mean, really, that just seems a little bit much.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, like in adults that go on weight loss medication, they typically gain the weight back too after they stop it. And so it's just creating that cycle of dieting and going on these medications over and over again.
Yeah.
And can I make a comment too?
Sure.
Yeah, I think this is a good comment or a good quote from Dr. John McDougall, because when they talk about the lifestyle changes, give that a try, and what the advice that they give to combat childhood obesity. This is a good quote from John McDougall. It says, "Until physicians and dietitians stop thinking about causes of common diseases under the mistaken notion that the well-balanced American diet offers correct nutrition, we will be handicapped both in our attempts at diagnosis and in our ability to provide effective treatments for our patients." So kind of saying how, until we give up this notion that a balanced, a moderate or, moderate type of a diet, everything in moderation kind of a diet is correct nutrition, we're going to be handicapped. And so we need to, get, like you were saying, lifestyle medicine providers and get and educate about a more whole food plant-based diet. And then we'll actually have correct nutrition and actually show some effectiveness on diet and lifestyle change. Until we divorce ourselves from that notion that this balanced American moderate, just in this and that in moderation, we're never going to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and Scott, this screen is the summary of some of the recommendations. So basically, that we should be screening for obesity in children and adolescents 2 and up annually, which I think is definitely a good idea. Screen for comorbidities, and we should be doing that, especially like cholesterols at an earlier age. Screen for type 2 diabetes. NAFLD is fatty liver or liver damage from infiltration of fat. And then it goes down into this treatments recommendations. And
yeah, I see it there now.
Yeah. So for kids that are 6 and up, it talks about doing this intensive health, behavior, and lifestyle treatment. And so what they recommend is that this 26 hours over 3 to 12 months, which is a lot of how are we gonna get that? And I've come to the idea that for me, it's about educating my patients every time I see them for well checks, and talk about the foods that they should be eating and about having a healthy relationship. We talked about some of the issues surrounding ways we sabotage our kids' relationship to food, but we need to talk about in every visit that we do with them in the healthcare field. We need to talk about what is a healthy relationship. How do we have a better relationship with food? How do we get the right kinds of food? What do our bodies really need, and what don't they need? So, and then, here's where it says adolescents age 12 and up with obesity should be offered weight loss pharmacotherapy. And then below that is the 13 years and up with severe obesity should be offered surgery. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So the question I asked for the group is, where can parents get intensive lifestyle medicine training for free with free coaching? Where is that available?
Right here.
Right here.
Here, yeah.
It's available. It's like, we don't have to say it's not available anymore. It's available. Anybody can log on. Anybody can look at the videos. They can have independent visits with either their doctor to discuss it further, one who knows about it, or with a medical student who's learning about this and has good supervision and is able to counsel the patient. So there is a system available that we have been working on developing here. It works for a number of people. We've heard the testimonials. It's a question of spreading to more people. And it's sort of a distraction to think about using a drug to fix a problem, which is a food-related problem. That's what Dr. McDougall would say. It's the food, just fix the food. Let's spend money on teaching our families, our kids, the schools about healthy food choices, and we'll get there eventually. But boy, it sure is a distraction for the medicines these days. We are a really pill-oriented society, and even the new medicine for mild dementia, that's what, $26,000 a year. For not for moderate or severe, it doesn't really fix the problem, but it's been FDA approved recently, and so the insurance companies will pay for that now, yes. And who pays for that? We are, in higher insurance premiums instead of having that money go to preventive care. That's the sick care system that we need to somehow figure out a way to bust. And it's going to take more than us to do that. But we are the start of it. And as more people keep logging on and listening and learning, there's a chance it could happen.
Yeah. We don't have time for it, but I had another one about personal responsibility that the parents should have in guiding their child to the right food. So really, yeah, people need to take more responsibility. We can't blame the kids for eating junk food. And really this drives me crazy when parents come in and say, yeah, oh, he's a picky eater, he'll eat nothing but junk food. And he'll eat, and I'm like, well, who is the one that does the shopping? Is your 6-year-old the one that's going out and shopping for this junk food? Really? Are you blaming the 6-year-old for eating junk food and not eating anything else? So really, it's got to also come down to taking some personal responsibility, guiding that child. Really, it's such an important thing. Guiding the child to eat the right foods, and just to act as a role model for your kids. So you really, it does start with the parents and being that role model.
You can play the video if you want. I think that someone was asking about it in the chat.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I don't think people would mind going a few minutes over. It'd be fine.
Here, let me share this. There we go. Okay.
Food and beverage companies frame body weight.
I don't know why this keeps doing this, guys.
As a matter of personal choice. Right? Even when we're not distracted, the power of the eat more food environment may sometimes overcome our conscious controls over eating. One look around the room at a dietitian convention can tell you that even nutrition professionals are vulnerable to the aggressively marketed ubiquity of tasty, cheap, convenient calories. This suggests that there are aspects of our eating behaviors that defy personal insight by flying below the radar of conscious awareness. Right? Appetite physiologists call the result of these subconscious actions passive overconsumption. Remember that brain scan study where the thought of a milkshake lit up the same reward pathways in the brain as substance abuse? That was triggered just by a picture of a milkshake. Right? Dopamine gets released, cravings get activated, and we're motivated to eat. Intellectually, we know it's just an image, but our lizard brain just sees survival. Right? It's just a reflexive response over which we have little control, which is why marketers ensure that there are pictures of milkshakes and their equivalents everywhere. Maintaining a balance between calories in and calories out feels like a series of voluntary acts under conscious control, but it may be more akin to bodily functions such as blinking, breathing, coughing, swallowing, or sleeping. I mean, you can try to will yourself power over any of those, but by and large they just happen automatically, driven by ancient scripts. Not only are food ads ubiquitous, so is the food. The types of establishments selling food products expanded dramatically in the 1970s and 1980s. Now there's candy and snacks at checkout counters of gas stations, and drugstores, and bookstores, and places that used to just sell clothes or hardware or home furnishings, building supplies. Right? The largest food retailer in the United States is Walmart. There's that jolt of dopamine and artificially stimulated feelings of hunger around every turn. Every day, we run the gauntlet. It's become socially acceptable to eat anywhere, in your car, on the street, or packed in a crowded bus, right? We've become a snacking society. Vending machines are everywhere. Daily eating episodes seem to have gone up by about a quarter from the late 1970s, from about 4 to 5 occasions a day, potentially accounting for twice the calorie increase attributed to increasing portion sizes. Snacks and beverages alone could account for the bulk of the calorie surplus implicated in the obesity epidemic. And think of the children. Here we are trying to do the best for our kids, right? Role modeling, healthy habits, feeding them healthy foods, but then they venture out into a veritable tornado of junky food and manipulative messages. This commentary in the New England Journal of Medicine asked, why should our efforts to protect our children from life-threatening illness be undermined by massive marketing campaigns from the manufacturers of junk food? Pediatricians are now encouraged to have the French fry discussion with parents at the 12-month well-child visit, and not wait all the way until year 2. And even that may be too late. 2/3 of infants are being fed junk food by their first birthday. Dr. David Katz may have said it best in the Harvard Health Policy Review. Those who contend that parental or personal responsibility should carry the day despite these environmental temptations might consider the implications of generalizing the principle. Perhaps children should be encouraged, but not required to attend school, and tempted each morning by alternatives such as buses to the circus, zoo, or beach.
Basically just saying there that that we really need to take that responsibility on ourselves to guide those kids. And also, we can almost talk about this at a later date, but there are other peripheral issues to think about, things like fat shaming that goes on, and the wrong messages are being sent by the parents, and even the physicians send wrong messages about fat shaming and dieting and that kind of stuff. There's also issues of racism, about systemic racism, and the fact that there are masses of people that are in food deserts, that don't have access to good healthy foods, that they eat at fast food places or the Dollar Tree, junk food from the Dollar Tree or Walmart or whatever, because that's all they have access to. So there's all kinds of issues that are parallel to causing this problem, that I definitely think are worth exploring. So there's things that we can talk about, but the big one that we wanted to talk about today was that from the American Academy of Pediatrics, this big organization that acts as kind of the umbrella for all pediatricians who act as sort of the protectorate, the health protectorate of your children, is recommending that we put kids on medicines and do surgery on them at a very young age, and it's just disturbing. So I hope you feel that same way. And any thoughts? Does anybody else have any other thoughts about it before we wind up?
Thank you. I really appreciate you doing this again. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Good night. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much for doing that. And I think we're good. At some point when we have the open forum, people may have more questions. Trouty? Just unmute yourself.
I'm amazed and appalled about the pharmaceutical companies that make so much money over the young people, even not holding back of surgery. It is outrageous to me. the parents should be really the ones that look for healthy food so the children can grow up in a normal way.
I agree.
Okay, everyone, until the next time. Look forward to seeing you next week. Scott, what's up next week?
Gastrointestinal health, and then an open forum after that.
Very good.
So 2 weeks we'll have the open forum and people can ask more questions about this. Is that right? 2 weeks?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Good. Or you can always ask questions about it next week. I hope to be here.
Exactly.
So. Good.
Perfect. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks
Have a good night,
again.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.